And good afternoon. It is a beautiful sunny day here in the forest of southwest Colorado. It is June 5th, 2016. And today is a special day. Today is the 12-year anniversary. It has been 12 years since my addiction, that period, those dark years I've talked about, late 1990s, early 2000s, and I'm going to talk about my recovery from heroin addiction. This is something that I've touched upon. I've shared versions of the story in a highly emotional, highly charged manner. I've alluded to aspects of my story in other videos. For a lot of people, it's a day of celebration where people go to AA and NA and they talk about their recovery. And part of my story is getting away from AA and NA. And I'm going to focus more on my recovery as I sit here under the sun and bring in that frequency instead of focus on the disease. There'll be things that I'll touch upon, but I don't want this podcast going there. But I am going to write about that place I was at, and why. We could talk about that now, though, in brief. And I've talked about it in a previous podcast. Prior to September 11th, 2001, just about a few years, I became a product briefly of my environment. There were certain factors that were contributing factors regarding my upbringing, my the decisions that I made for myself, being in an environment where there wasn't any family, my mom in New York and my father going back east after he remarried a woman from his country, and then of course all the trauma that was still inside of me that was not healed regarding the past, and all the moving that I had been through, and all the verbal abuse. And there was that confusion concerning identity. I had a role model in my life, and while he taught me how to box and do certain things, there were also some negative aspects that I think that I absorbed from him, spiritually speaking. And it's amazing how one's demons can affect someone else when they're in a weak place. Now, those are interesting years, the late 90s. Some of you may have heard or experienced strange things during that period as that solar cycle, the solar maximum, kicked off. And I would say that we've seen this reoccurring pattern. So I've learned a lot from this recovery. Here I am. I'm literally a solar cycle later. So there's some unique things that relate to my story, how I got involved in it, what I identify to be some of the root causes. A little bit different than what you hear about at your average AA or NA meeting, where there is heavy emphasis on being born with an addiction. The idea of learned behavior being strongly affected by your environment, or the idea of using something to suppress your emotions or intuition. I've long ago concluded that I think that there's a number of people out there that are suffering from addiction that are actually stuffing their feelings because they don't know how to handle that level of awareness, because it's never been taught to them. We're taught to suppress that level of our awareness and our feelings. And we don't live in a world where a lot of people have access to positive role models, teach people how to channel their energies in a wise manner, from their sexuality to their intellect to their power, their raw power and strength. I think that sums up quite a bit. And so there are deeper root causes for why some people experience addiction, and why in some areas, in some parts of the planet during certain years, parts of a cycle, there are more overdoses, deaths from the use of heroin. So what I've come to learn since then is that same year of all years, where I accepted someone's offer, a close friend, to, be real tough. be real tough. We were already martial arts buddies. We're going to show we're tough. We can do this. Hey, they lied about marijuana. And it's like neither of us had a positive. Both of us were misled, obviously, to a certain degree, to even think that for a second. So, I willfully wanted to investigate aspects of the dark side. And it wasn't necessarily being influenced by Pulp Fiction, but if you look at that particular era of time, there were a fair amount of influences in our world to shoot up and numb out. And again, and then we'll move on. I believe on a subconscious level, people are intuitively responding. They're responding to their intuition in a way that is very dangerous. But this is actually how humans have been for a prolonged period of time. Stuffing to hold back intuition, certain emotions, insights, even ideas, thinking about certain things. People use drugs to numb out. And there are certain times where they're numbing out even more in certain places because of where they are on the planet, the magnetics, Portland being one of them, certain places where there's more people at a certain point in time numbing out. So that same year of 99, boom, record number of overdoses. So there was also that period of recovery. In 2002, 3, and 4, as the solar cycle quieted down. And the last time that I went through a recovery cycle was 2004. Again, there were periods like War and Peace, periods of sobriety and falling off the wagon. And as I reached the end of that addiction phase, we'll just say that without even getting into details, the risk that I was getting myself involved in was slightly increasing. The level that I would trash myself for 2 to 3 days, for example, straight. And being that you're shooting something up, the amount of blood involved in trying to hit a vein that is difficult to hit because of all the abuse taking place during that time period on the arm. Trying to get a hit, that's just incredible. But a lot of people don't understand where it comes from, where the addiction comes from, and from there how to actually heal from that. So I knew that I was on a very different path during that latter part of the addiction, which would be the year 2004. Okay, so that's where we're going to go now. We're going to go to 2004. So it was 12 years ago since my recovery began from that way of life. And I actually very quickly, part of my story is within 6 months of my recovery date, I'm producing my first episode of Outside the Box TV, which also happened to coincide a day after my grandfather's death. My grandfather always said, Alex, I don't want to leave this planet until you're on the right path in life. I found those words, in hindsight, ominous in a positive way. My grandfather's spirit is still with me. I keep his NRA shirt, his NRA baseball cap, actually, as a something to remember him by, but also using it as a form of protection. My grandfather, the mountain man, the pilot, the fisherman, the landowner, the carpenter, a lot of things, a lot of things to a lot of people. My grandfather was more my own father in a lot of ways. We're talking about on my mother's side. And he was more my own father than the person that I saw as my role model, a martial arts teacher who also had his own dark side and his past criminal actions regarding violence and the unrestrained use of the martial arts. To be actually somewhat blunt with you, misuse of it, organized crime, being real bad and tough, and it's about who can stomp somebody's head in and be willing to kind of promote that mentality onto somebody else. So with a lot of people in my life, there's been some very good things that I've learned from some people, and that I've also gone, whoa, some serious archonic stuff. And in hindsight, now I'm 36 years old, when you start absorbing certain aspects of that frequency, you can end up out of health, depressed, afflicted by a spirit, you can all of a sudden wake up with the obsession to use and numb out from something, which is, again, the cycle that began with me in that year of 1999. Again, really wild years leading up to 2004, and a lot of periods of working. So working and trying to hide an addiction. Oh, that's a fun one. Oh yeah, just try that. It wasn't exactly like wandering the streets, living in the streets, homeless junkie. I was actually never homeless when I used. So I don't want anybody's imagination start going in strange places like, I emerged from the streets and blah, 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 like something out of a old European novel or something. It was working at the grocery store. It was working at GNC. It was working at Nordstrom. I was working at a restaurant during the graveyard shift. And all the while, I was working at one point at the Rose Garden at one of the restaurants called Legends. And that was 2003. I was working at the Benson 4-Star Hotel in 2002, 2003. So I have a history of employment during this period in time. And that is a very strange, difficult, and very challenging way to live. I think I almost took it on as a challenge. But in 2004, by that time, I had already been inundated with information about 9/11 and the New World Order. And, the rest is history. I mean, the seeds were planted. David Icke has said some pretty outrageous things. He's also put out some good information. His 1995 book, And the Truth Shall Set You Free, is the one book that I would recommend to anyone. He doesn't even get into reptilians in that book, archons, or anything like that, but he does leave it open to interpretation. There's something going on, this prison controller, control freak consciousness coming from the fourth dimension, or who knows God where, whatever. A lot of the spiritual concepts that he discusses in his books, especially part 2, The Freedom. So that, in addition to Coast to Coast AM and having the 111 experience in 2002 and 2003, I didn't know about the solar cycle influence, but I had dreams about solar flares hitting the earth and the grid going down when I was a youngster, or visions rather. Imaginations, daydreams, waking life thoughts. Waking thoughts about a red sky and being on a cliff of safety, and thinking, before I knew what martial arts were, seeing my skills in combat getting me through a very chaotic situation. Yeah, I remember that. I remember being 8 years old, 9 years old, and having these perceptions along with robots and computers scanning the organic human mind and logging the images. No shit. Now we live in a world where they talk about that, along with creating the synthetic human genome. But this is not a regular radio show. This is about my recovery. What preceded my recovery from shooting myself up with heroin and cocaine. I don't want to talk about, really, heroin's evil demonic sister brother hybrid. Cocaina. That's a very bad place to be. To be taking yourself off to Scotty, beaming up to Scotty, ears ringing and everything, sounds like water. I'll turn on the water after a hit of cocaine. Never described this experience before. Put on a little I Feel Love by Donna Summer. Maybe put on Time by Pink Floyd and blast off to Scotty. And then come down. Trying to think of those lyrics from Pink Floyd. But ticking away the moments that make up a dull day. And then, of course, the prophetic lyrics of Time. The sun racing around to come up behind you again. The sun is the same in a relative way, but you're older. And all the rest, oh, it was Comfortably Numb. But that was the song. Hello, hello, hello. Is there anybody in there? as that black gunk went into the vein. Just nod if you can hear me. As I looked at the skyline of Portland, Oregon. Is there anybody home? And I remember the song. I actually had the CD at the time from Billy Idol, Eyes Without a Face, sitting down in that apartment in downtown Portland, my second apartment, after I've already been living on my own for 6 months, 7 months. Got kicked out of the other apartment in Southeast Portland off 37th and Cora. Picked the wrong roommates, made some noise. Got evicted November 98. I'm moving into downtown Portland. I'm not liking my job at Fred Meyer. There's late nights getting alcohol with my friend. And again, product of the environment. Let's be tough. Oh, we're tough guys. Oh, they lied to us about marijuana, right? This dark energy is coming in. It's the Pulp Fiction post-era, post-goth. There's a lot of depression. The drugs were everywhere in Portland then. There were dozens of these guys from Honduras that are no longer on the streets of Portland. But during that window of time, it was all over Old Town Chinatown. Now, in a future video, for those of you who are subscribers that are going to be coming back, you've seen me in the past talk about the Shanghai tunnels, where they kidnap people in the 1800s. I'm not joking. Loggers, miners, sailors that found themselves in Portland when they were building it, they would get slipped a roofie, or they actually had to make special roofies so it wouldn't kill them, because they were ending up with dead bodies. But men and women, and the women that were prostitutes that were brought into Portland, they would dupe these unwitting drunks and men that they poisoned into signing away their freedom, and ending up shanghaied on someone's ship out to sea as a slave, gone for years on end, or they were knocked out. In many cases, they were smuggled into the underground. Trapdoors. I'm actually going to show you a half-hour documentary that shows high-quality footage. It just came out in recent years. Now, I talked about this years ago on my show, The Connection. What is The Connection? That's the area, folks, where I bought the drugs. The drugs that I bought, the drugs that were available, the drugs that were aplenty. Oh, $8 chiva. Chiva, what you want? Uno chiva? Uno blanca. 101. Oh, 101? Oh, I got 14.15. Will that work? 2 for 15? This type of fucking street quality shit, which dominated most of my purchases. I was ripped off a few times. But, it was like open season. Oh, freedom. Yeah, downtown Portland. I'm an adult now, 19 years old. Oh, real tough guy. I've got your own apartment. Got my own fake ID. Oh, yeah, I'm not a gangster. But you know what? I'm exploring another dark side. Again, prior to that, I had high hopes. I'd be mentored by this friend of the family. And, coach, self-defense coach. And he talked a big line. Oh, we'll do this, or maybe I'll set you up with this. Maybe if you do this, this will happen. And I'm not blaming him. I'm describing to you what was going on with my life, in my mind at that time. All the things kind of that were coinciding with the addiction phase. So I was feeling very let down because this person was really more of an energy vampire master manipulator who liked to just tell old stories about himself, being Mr. Invincible. Something out of a movie, beyond a movie. Man, the story of this guy was beyond a movie. The type of stuff that he would deal with. And so I worshipped him in my own mind. And when I saw him going in his own direction, and when I saw how he threw me under the bus when I did come to people around me with news of what was going on, I found myself alone. And that was something that needed to happen between those years of the late 90s to 2003 and 4 for me to not being able to go through that experience alone, and to go through the experience of hitting rock bottom at a faster rate as a younger person in order to actually heal from the situation and move on. So in 2004, and that's the interesting time frame that a lot of this was moving forward. 2004, June 5th, 2004, that happens to be the day of the Venus transit. Now, the days leading up to that, I'd say a binge of 3 days. and I had collected a certain amount of insurance money because someone ran into my vehicle. I had a CRX at that time. So instead of getting another vehicle and continuing my job at the Olive Garden and paying my rent, everything was fine. I was working and I was renting a place, renting a room from someone, actually right off 37th and Hawthorne. And yeah, I just voluntarily, just as they say, went back out as that money came in, one last ride, as they say, and immediately kick out of the place and called my friend and got my stuff. I'm not high at the moment, but I'm probably less than 24 hours off the last hit. And I get all my stuff in storage at this place in Portland, the East Side Storage Facility, I think. And then my friend said, man, you don't have to go. He had already been, this is the person that got me into it. He had already been a year into his recovery. So he's offering for me to stay at his place. He's offering just, can't use here. I say, I appreciate the offer, but I'm going out for one last ride. And it was one last ride, but I did go back out. And I'm trying to think of, those 2 or 3 days. Nothing super exciting happened. And I had my car, and I never had any problems towards the very end as far as getting arrested or shoplifting or any legal things like that. There were a couple things earlier on, when I dove first in 99, 2000, but towards the end, I feel a strong sense of divine protection because a lot of things did not happen that could have happened. So there was this strong sense, and I was fully aware of it at the time, that there was something divine happening within me. An old friend that claims to have a deeper psychic connection to the spirit realm, but at the time, and the friend at the time in Portland said that they said, whether they were the spirit guides that he interpreted to be working around me or observing this, he said that they said that this was my last time, or this is my last chance. Either get it right now, get over this situation now, again during this Venus transit of June 5th, 2004. I'm going to make sure I have the dates completely correct as I report this. And so, jail was not involved that last time. Instead, it was more of a situation of going to Hooper Detox and voluntarily giving up my freedom and going into a treatment center to actually, they probably don't allow smoking anymore, but maybe they do. Not everybody can quit everything at once, but they had an area where you can smoke your rollies. So again, at that time, I had already been exposed to a lot of Coast to Coast AM, and then David Icke's book, and following the Alex Jones work, many of the documentaries up until that point. Promoting them, I had already made friends with Clyde Lewis of Ground Zero Radio, and I remember telling Clyde Lewis and confiding with him during those last days of using that I had a problem, that I was going to this treatment center, and that I was going to start Outside the Box TV. I had thrown out the intentions, actually for the first time out into the ether, about, oh wow, this is deep, several weeks before June 5th, 2004, before that clean date, right? I called in to Clyde Lewis's Ground Zero Radio, and the guest was none other than Alex Jones. And I had made some comment. I don't think that audio is out there online. Clyde doesn't have a lot of his older shows from the earlier years archived online. But at one point I had the CD, and I hung on to that. Like that was, like you hang on to a picture, you hang on to a memory, hang on to a photo book. Now, I didn't say that I was overcoming or about to overcome heroin addiction. I just said, how much their work had touched me, both of them, spiritually, and how dedicated I was to helping in any way I could by getting involved in all of this, getting involved in the alternative media, starting my own show, talking about 9/11 during those years when it was very important to put out that information. and it was much closer to the date, and we were much more in a hysteria on another level of Al Qaeda. Now they switched things to ISIS. It's a different, broader, in a way scarier type of psyops that they're playing out now, but it was a much softer version, in my opinion, in those years of 2004, 2005. And again, I'm being affected on some level psychically, physically by the war. That's all I can say, and it's still going on. The sense of trauma and even a sense of premonition in July of 2001 that something was going to happen in Afghanistan, wishing I had a way to go and visit the country I've never seen, the country of my father, but the country that I had never been in, being born in Oregon. Not a Muslim, not someone that speaks Farsi, but wanting to see it before it was gone. Not too different than Dances with Wolves. Dances with Wolves, and him wanting to see the frontier. Right now, that's how I see America, and that's what I'm doing now. Here I am on my 12-year anniversary, sitting here under the sun in one of the most beautiful areas in all Colorado, working for myself and making very powerful goals right now to increase the amount of income that I am raising from these videos that I am doing, this YouTube channel, and bringing in other forms of residual income, moral ways of making a living. Not getting involved in scams or certain types of questionable marketing programs and schemes. It's a very long road that I've been on. To talk about the story between 2004 and 2016, where we are now, the last 12 years, that would take hours. But that story is going to be told. Everything that's happened between that point of recovery from the addiction and where I'm at now. What I can say in hindsight is, again, I jumped into the addiction with both feet, and even though there was periods of recovery, when I used hard. And I used alone. And I was using to mask certain intuitions, feelings, ways I was responding to the solar cycle, not knowing how to deal with those upset emotions and traumas that were a lot closer to my life at that time, closer in time. And then, of course, 9/11. When 9/11 actually happened, I was at the treatment center. I was at St. Vincent de Paul in 13th and Washington. There was actually a guy that I was friends with that actually said, "Your kind's the enemy," knowing I was half Afghani. He literally said this. He literally said that I was the enemy. And so that's what some of you don't know. It's what it's been like to walk in the skin. Talk about my parents. I come from a broken home. I come from a single mother household where my father was the enemy, and so was his culture. And terrorists, they're not. Assholes and humans, basically. They were humans in their own way. Today, and my life has always really been this way, but I'm not close to either side of the family. So what I can tell you now, there's a lot of things to talk about with regards to recovery. I have done this alone. I have done this without being enabled or helped by family on either side. There's never really been, like with my parents, a deeper conversation about how all that happened to begin with. What could have led to that? What could have led to the child actually sticking themselves with the needle? There's never been that type of sit down and healing. In fact, I just grew more distant from my dad's family after that, but especially so after the beginning of my Outside the Box TV series, and the things that I'm getting involved in and talking about 9/11 and torture. But let's get back to that period where my grandfather's passing away. This is like November 27th, 28th in the year 2004. The election between Bush and Kerry is taking place. I can still remember being at Dante's Inferno on 3rd and Southwest Burnside, seeing my buddy Clyde Lewis, in fact, filming it and putting it on Access TV. It was my pilot episode before OTB TV #1. And it featured a collage of Clyde Lewis's best of rants and raves about this skull and bones, New World Order, inside jobs, shadow government. Back in the day, some of this talk was a lot more digestible. A lot of people were on the same page. There was a lot of awakening taking place. Again, I attribute a lot to the solar cycle. So alternative media was on the upswing. It was fresh. YouTube had just come out in 2005, 2006, marking the first few years of me on Access TV. Later on YouTube, it's now the 10-year anniversary, March 2006. So a little bit after that, 10-year anniversary of my lifetime on YouTube. Now with over 8,000 subscribers, soon to 10,000 and beyond. This time I'm actually going to pull a lever. I'm actually going to hit the button. I'm actually going to pull out the energetic rocket launcher, and I'm going to lock in to my target and expand this channel and expand and improve my life. But my own recovery stemmed from aligning with my truth and talking about this truth. And that's where my healing began to occur. When I began to speak about these issues and write and plan out shows and read books, it catapulted a lot of healing for me. Not so much sitting in a lotus position going, man, I ground out the drug demons. I did a little meditation. I went to Vipassana in 2002 and then, sat for 10 days in silence, just observe the breath. Type in SN Goenka. 10-day meditation. I was there, man. I was there. No, not with Goenka per se, but definitely at a Vipassana school. Breathe in from the nose. You can take a deep breath to start. Just observe the breath. Observe. Don't react. The Goenka tapes they would play, the deep Indian voice of wisdom. Be equanimous. Observe. Isha. And these other Indian words, and you'd start chanting the Gale Malagre Protection. You gotta better protection. I'm like, what? Did you say the Jolly Man likes skate protection? Yeah, man. Sounds like the guy said, Jolly Man likes skate protection. Jolly Man likes skate protection. My friend who also recovered from heroin that got me into heroin is a very different man today. A happy relationship down in Arizona, living and working in Phoenix and on his own liberty-based lifestyle, on and off the grid, studying meditation. I mean, he's definitely connected to his feminine side for a heterosexual guy compared to the I'm a fucking tough motherfucker with my steel-toe boots fucking character that used to be back in the day, although he probably still wears the boots. But point is that he also went to Vipassana after hearing my review of it. I said it was life-changing. Now, again, I was not in 2002 finished for the last time, but I had spurts of 9 months on the straight and narrow, bussing tables. I went back to school, by the way, creative writing. I mean, I started typing out some very interesting things and researching things when I was living on Hawthorne. There was something up 47th to Southeast Hawthorne. Shout out to my Portland listeners that at that time, there was just like knowledge and spiritual centering and grounding. I was doing some Kung Fu at the time and reading books and learning about the implantable microchip for the first time. And again, having access to cable TV, saw Alex Jones's, the power of Access TV, saw Alex Jones's 9/11 Road to Tyranny, despite the stuff I've said in recent years. During that time, the stuff that he was putting out was very, very important for people to see and think about. Okay, the man has changed since then, and some of the research isn't necessarily 100% solid that's in that film, but it was an idea that was bulletproof, an idea whose time has come. I don't normally quote that anymore from V for Vendetta, but that's real, and that's an expression of that. Okay, and that in my mind, that was my spiritual brother from another galaxy, perhaps the time of Atlantis, when we were on the other side, and and perhaps another time and period in space, in a galaxy far, far away. But I saw this as my blood brother of sorts, and it was real. It was very real, and to a certain extent it was. I did go on to recover, and I did go on to start my TV show. Now, that's another thing about, what that brought into my life, covering the TV show and the psychic blowback, and how I have been this entire time on this path of learning my own self-sufficiency so I'm not someone else's slave, so I can focus my time and effort on the information and not be in survival mode. And as I found, just being off drugs and being on the straight and narrow doesn't necessarily make things easier. You start learning about, which isn't really the topic of our video, but I've mentioned in other videos, if you're an addict and you're in Portland, you have a lot of options for free housing, whereas the person without a drug problem has no options for free housing. It's about the bureaucracy of funding and the middlemen, the poverty pimps, if you will. The people that make money off the homeless, well, there's dope head pimps then, if you will. People that are lined up to make money for the funding, for the treatment. Whereas there isn't money the government's throwing to actually help people become self-sufficient or reward them for positive behavior. So that's the end of that rant. And that's why I left Portland for the last time. There's a reason why there's a lot of drug addicts there. There's a reason why I was surrounded by it in the 1990s, living in downtown Portland. And that is a bigger part of the culture than what I was aware of at that time. I had no awareness of the spiritual dimension and the Shanghai tunnels and the fact that people were kidnapped and raped and murdered in that same area by the thousands. And all the female prostitutes, that who knows how many men they had to bang in the single day, and whatever happened to them. Some of them were prisoners too, according to urban mythos of the old Portland. Dungeons and chambers and cells, underground, rumors of glass, and all these boots that were found where men were forced to stay in a certain area, but if they were to walk over a certain area, they'd walk over broken glass. These are the legends of the things that happened under the area where I was buying uno chiva, una blanca, that area that's been exploding even to this day. Not to mention crack if you just go up the street to 5th and 6th, but the overall debauchery that you've seen on my YouTube channel, the nightclub scene, the dirty, Mike Blue Hair, the cop watchers, down there, the Portland Circus, that's it. That's that same area. That's it. And here we are seeing really crazy behavior in recent years in that area. And what? We're in the next solar cycle. We're just now getting through the solar maximum. Are you seeing what I see? Are you feeling this? What I'm trying to show you. Portland, Oregon, the city of my birth, is a place that has a lot of these social ill stuff going on during the solar maximums. And person-to-person crimes, attempted sexual assault. I mean, you are talking about some heavy, dark, spiritual energies and entities, alive and well in my opinion. And so drug addicts oftentimes have entity attachments, or there are reasons why some people fall into a state of depression or sadness. They fall down into a hole of despair, and if they're in a particular geographic area, as far as I see it right now, they're just food for those spiritual parasites. Oh, look at that person. Well, let's take them to a new level of pain. There's a reason why there's a lot of people in pain that are in Portland at different levels, whether they're homeless or not homeless. And so that's all I'm going to say on that rant. I remember talking, though, to other addicts about my greater awakenings that were helping me get off drugs, and they look at me like I had two heads on. It was all about, admitting your powerlessness. The book of AA and Bill W. And I saw that early on as mind control, and I heard that there was some hypocrisy with Bill W. I heard that he had later taken acid and had an expansion of consciousness. And, at that point, and there was a period in time where I wasn't even smoking marijuana. And I do believe in the responsible use of marijuana. I do believe some people use it to escape their feelings and emotions. I do not think that that's healthy, to use anything to escape your feelings and emotions, even if it's coffee. So I saw the coffee drinkers. I saw the yeah, man, I fucking keep coming back, man. You got a sponsor? Like, literally, people sponsoring other people that are fucking straight up coffee, nicotine, nicocrack, as I choose to call it, addicts. And then you have the women that have been traumatized. Some of them have been raped. And there's also the sexual tension. Is, oh, look at her. I still remember one girl, or a few of them. And there was that sense of, part of the reason why some people use also is, as I've talked about in other videos, we're not going to get into it now, it's really highly charged, is the lack of someone in your life to love. And maybe never really feeling loved by your parents. So, unconscious behavior, yeah, just numb out. So you see a beautiful person. Yeah, what about the people who are naturally psychic, spiritual, and loving that has kind of ended up on the wrong side of the tracks? Those people really are craving a heartfelt cuddle session. I mean, that's therapeutic. I think people need that. I think more of us need that in our lives. Okay. That aside, you're in an AA meeting and we're not in a society anyways, sober or not, where men and women really have the maturity to talk to each other. So there's a lot of sexual tension. People want what they really can't have or know how to go out and get. That's the real reason the men and women separate in some cases. And you have the men's group and the women's group, and that feels weird. That feels like you're seeing more of the sickness of society. The very fact that we're separate. No, we're not an Islamic country. I'm not a Muslim. Okay, and I rejected the religion of Islam when my dad's family tried to force that on me. I'm not going to come now into the AA in a religion and develop some new woman issue that I don't previously have because you people have it and you women have some issues with men. No, fuck this. It's the lack of romance and it's the lack of connection in our lives that in some cases brings the sickness. But also, I come out in nature and I've been a single man for a long time. There's nothing like the power of being in your power and overcoming the loneliness from being single. And this is really, in some cases, a break, an in-between reality before meeting someone great when you really develop that self-love. And I know this to be the truth, and that's the end of this particular rant. Because a couple of different dots that I want to connect here. The next aspect of my recovery and why it happened was getting out of that zone to a certain degree. Now, I went back and I maintained a connection with downtown because then I'm working at Ruth Chris Steakhouse as a busser. And I'm overcoming that negative Burnside energy, whereas before it was almost consuming. I mean, they would put people up in free housing in areas like the old Estate Hotel off of Cooch, off of 2nd and Burnside in downtown Portland. That's right above where the drugs are being sold, just a few blocks away. So for years they've had, and there's many other subsidized housing, and the Danmore, the new Danmore. I mean, that's the Center for Central City Concern. Again, big money, bureaucracy, for people that are working in the recovery circuit. It's like, okay, instead of actually really deal with the problem, there's an actual micro industry. Where does that leave the people that are homeless in Portland that are not using drugs? But I digress. But this is the dysfunction that is the current Portland, and it's contributing to the major social out of balance issues and the overabundance of drugs and drug addicts in Portland, Oregon today. Again, it's in the culture, vice and prostitution and gambling and dogfighting. If you're a gangbanger, Cripper blood up in the north side of the town, yeah, baby, maybe throwing a few blazers here and there at the dogfight. All stuff that we've seen in Portland and all the gangster tales of man hurting man and ooh, tough guy, this, that, and the other, one man verse 200. That's right, my old friend dealing with the blood riot of 1994 at the Holiday Inn Hotel off 82nd and Northeast Columbia Boulevard, right outside of the Portland Airport, PDX. I have pretty good memory, man. So Portland ain't a gangster's paradise. Portland's a little gangster friggin' scumbag center, though, on a smaller scale. There hasn't been any good movies made about it, like Gangs of New York or Goodfellas. But that director, who made 2 great films, including Casino, that's right, Scorsese. Well, he did all 3. Man, a director like that, if you were to take a stab at Portland's drug scene, take a stab at Portland's old organized crime scene where the city themselves built those Shanghai tunnels, Gangs of New York style, like, oh my God, somebody, dear Lord, messenger of light, let's see, let me get some synchronicity going. If any of you know Martin Scorsese, you need to connect me and this man. That's all I got to say. Martin Scorsese needs to do a video on the old Portland crime world and literally slowly map it all the way up to at least the 1950s to 1970s. There's not a whole lot of info about that, and as you as I know, a lot of the old organized crime stuff went into mainstream casinos owned by corporations. A lot of organized crime stuff is maintained by corporations now, and banks doing the loaning. Less loan sharks running around, and they're collectors. Now, there's different ways that collections are done now up in here. So, Told you that, tell you this. Portland has always kind of had that heavy, angry, suppressed slave, kidnap, sexually suppressed, rape, city of the wounded goddess energy. Me being a sponge, some people use the word empath, also dealing with trauma, not knowing how to deal with that trauma, not knowing who I was yet. Yes, you have a cocktail, you have a recipe for disaster. Some could say growth. I jumped in the experience. Hey man, take a walk on the wild side. Say, do. But I'm going to do that without exploring my non-existent homosexual side. See, I'm not going to stick my hands between somebody's legs, some transsexual. Hey, dude, take a walk on the wild side, which is actually what that song's about. Say, hey, sugar, take a walk on the wild side. See, I don't swing that way, but be a tough guy. Oh, all this heroin. You know that song from Pulp Fiction. Down, down, down. Down, 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 down. Just do it, man. You can do it. Down, 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 down. You're 19, man. Down. No, 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 no. Got your own apartment. Downtown Portland. Down, down. Hanging out with the older gangster. No, 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 no. Got nice clothes. No, 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 no. Living in downtown Portland. No, 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 no. Fake ID. Yeah. And it was just, it was my microscopic universe where I was taking a walk on the wild side, but in my mind, I was doing it within a frame of safety. And again, I made some serious errors in judgment, but I got out before I went to prison. Did 6 months in jail, 2 months spread out, and a little bit here, all in 2000 and 2001 was really marked by a lot of county jail time and court mandated inpatient time, followed by couple years of community college and restaurant work, and going out one last time just to sum up the whole thing. Okay, just to sum up the whole thing. Jail and recovery, 2000, 2001. Going into PCC, going to work at the Benson Hotel, starting to read David Icke books and starting to listen to Coast to Coast, and starting to, was it Kazam or Kazaa, an old downloading program, downloading my first ever conspiracy documentaries, going to the gun shows and buying old crusty VHS tapes. John Stoutman, the Michigan militia. I remember meeting him. What was the survival tablets? My early infant days of Alex Yancer exploring alternative media content. Jack McLam and the Idaho Radicals. 3%ers. Police and military against the New World Order, and just all kinds of stuff. Clyde Lewis talking about microchips and me researching the microchips for 14 hours straight. It was like I was on crack, but I wasn't. But you see, my laddie, in late 2003, and of course the bombs dropping in Iraq, phase 2, Middle Eastern gang rape. It was like whether I was affected by it. And then of course there was a large solar flare in November of 2003, and my sciatic nerve went out after a run. That's when I was waiting tables at Legends, actually serving drinks, fell off the wagon, and it's during a major solar flare, and my sciatic nerve goes out and I can't walk for a couple of weeks. Followed by some recovery, and again, one last walk on the wild side. And the Venus transit of 2004. As I lay there at the conclusion of maybe being up and run around and spend all my money for 2 or 3 days, and remarkably not getting robbed, remarkably not being arrested, remarkably not doing any major damage to my health or my car, but actually sleeping. Oh, that's right. I slept in my car after I quit on the 5th, waiting to get into Hooper. So I actually had a couple days of sobriety under my belt before I voluntarily gave up my freedom for a short period of time. And a couple premonitions that I had. I did have a couple premonitions. I think my psyche was blocked by all that abuse. Just by taking it off, it was like, boop, the balloon being held under the water now rises to the top of this, and you have a pop out of the water. I could feel several angels above me as I did that last hit of dope. at the railroad tracks over by Lloyd Center, maybe over by 15th, right around that area. And I think that there's someone else over there. I think it was such a pathetic shot. I didn't feel a thing. Whatever was left, that $4 worth of whatever. And I wasn't going to go on a shoplifting spree. I wasn't going to return to committing acts of crime because I had already, at that point, I was off probation. I was not on probation. I mentioned jail in 2000, 2001. I was off probation by several years. I wasn't about to just go back in. And so I could feel that angelic presence on that day. And I had a dream that a certain person that I knew, he was not my counselor, but I kind of wanted him to be my counselor. His name was Bruce. Bruce the Danmore. And I saw him as an angel coming to get me out of the inpatient treatment center where they would have a bed for me to stay at the Danmore Hotel. And that's what it's called. It's really a place where basically everybody's recovering from drugs and there's random UAs. And you have to go through their program in Central City Concern. Couple days a week, go to some AA meetings. And yeah, they don't pay for your food, but you have a safe place in downtown Portland where maybe you can talk to a few people and develop some friends. Anyways, I found myself really an outsider. And literally, in addition to going to meetings and going to my classes in acupuncture and taking it very seriously, and doing my whole goodbye, Ron, goodbye to heroin. Sometimes people do this in treatment and really feeling it. And I just noticed stuff around me. I felt like some of the counselors were fakes. I felt like some of the male counselors were there for the women. I felt like some of the people were acting like celebrities because of their sobriety dates. And I saw how stupid and kind of white trash and bikerish some of the employees were and are of Central City Concern. And I took note of that. I took note of my need to get away from them and the AA picnics and the NA picnics. And so, folks, when I say things started moving fast, they really started moving fast. From Danmore, from the last time I shot up to the Danmore, first Detox Hooper, to meeting Bruce and the dream about Bruce, and a dream about another friend. And me and another friend actually connected in a dream where I told him that I was all right. This was my a spiritual advisor at the time by the name of Carl. And when I talked to him on the phone, he said that he picked me up in spirit when he was meditating, when he was also sleeping or something to that effect, or in the astral plane. And I saw all these things as very strong signs. And this is just like a month after Alex Jones is on Clyde Lewis. And I'm saying, hey man, I'm going to get involved in this. And I meant it. And I felt a very strong connection with both of those men during that time period of my life. Things moving quickly through 2004 and moving on from the Danmore and moving out, where many people just decide to keep living there for as many years as they can, using their drug addiction as a way to continue to get free housing. And I saw how people were working the system then. More reason to get away from these people who are obviously not being what they're meant to be yet. They're living on welfare. They're living off the state. Oh, they're a disabled drug addict. Maybe their problems are the fact they're living in fucking Portland. I mean, and nobody was talking this way then. Just about the effects of the downtown Portland, the old Shanghai tunnels, and just the history of the city, the polluted water, the city of the wounded goddess. Nobody talked this way. But obviously, these people were fucked up in downtown Portland, and nobody ever connected the dots. Nobody ever connected let's just keep putting them up here, and people will live for 3-4 years, and one day they'll have a bad day and they'll go back down to Burnside and they'll get more fucking dope and get all cracked out in their room. People are getting kicked out all the time from their free housing for doing drugs. And so I'm doing my TV show on a weekly basis starting in 2005. And wow, I got involved quick. Okay, I remember now. By the summer, I've been through a lot. By the summer of 2004, it was July, I was only 1 month sober. I was only 1 month off the dope, and I'm bussing tables. Something in my intuition told me to call them on the phone and tell them, hey, or ask them, are you looking for work? I already had experience working at like 5 restaurants before that, Olive Garden, the truck stop in Aurora, graveyard, year 2000. Weird time and place. Oh yeah, during my peak and abuse, weird time and place. Benson Hotel, 2002. Olive Garden, Twilliger, or not Twilliger, but Lake Oswego. Olive Garden. That was towards the end of my use. That was the last ride of the spring of 2004. So here I am, just a few months past Olive Garden, 1 month past my sobriety, and boom, just like that, I'm working at Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. It was good for me for a while, and I actually had a decent boss at the beginning. He said, "Well, are you cool with being a busser and not a server?" Like, he was checking my ego at the door. I said, "Man, I'm cool with that." They did not know that I was in a drug program. There wasn't anything coming up with my past, the felonies for heroin possession in 2000, that never came up. The theft in 2000, that never came up. I was back in the swing of things, wearing nice clothes again, hanging out in downtown Portland, not feeling like, oh, I got to go to Burnside and get another Chiva Coca. And to again go back to this part of the solar cycle, I felt myself beginning to be able to be more left brain focused. The energetic pollution was less, and there were people almost lined up around the block waiting to get a bed to get in the treatment center. I kid you not. A lot of people that were using a few years earlier were waiting to get help. Now, there may have been, a little bit more funding, and there was more funding applied. But I literally saw some of the same individuals that were in the streets going or trying to be back in recovery around the same time. And that's something that I noticed then. I didn't really attribute it to the sun right away. But I knew there was a cycle. Like we know there's cycles in our life. I noticed there's a recovery cycle going on with a lot of these folks. 2006, 2007, 2008, 9, 10, 11. I was on cable access all those years and working at Ruth's Chris Steakhouse up until 2002. And I went to school for 2 years for a degree in radio broadcasting. And in 2005 and 2006, the woman that directed my TV show on Access TV became, in my mind, my first love and my first heartbreak. And since that time, and since leaving Portland and going in Costa Rica, a lot of this is history. A lot of this is now public on my YouTube channel. What I will say for another time is what it was like living in Portland during that period of sobriety while on the air and working at Ruth Chris Steakhouse, feeling like a male version of Cinderella without any Prince Charming coming to save me. I'm a male. I'm a single young male and a very controversial male, and living with a sense of insecurity about being half Afghanistani. Living in a world where that group has been blamed by 9/11, but also representing my role in the alternative media and being one of the only, or the only, Afghanis on Earth, which is kind of interesting. Out of a planet of 7 billion, I don't know of anybody else. None of you have ever indicated to me of anybody else. There's an Aziz Ansari. He probably is a distant relative. He's a famous Pakistani comedian, and he's all over Netflix. He's a Middle Eastern Seinfeld. Seinfeld and him are actually friends. I'm not trying to insult him by comparing him to Seinfeld. In fact, he might be much better than Seinfeld. I've never watched Aziz Ansari's material. But what I am saying is that this particular chapter, of which I'll get into later, is marked by a lot of personal trauma and suffering. Not from drug addiction, but feeling like I'm carrying a torch and that I'm being basically attacked by the world as a result of my actions, not rewarded for my recovery. So this is why I need to write a book, so people know all of what I've been through and all of what I've overcome. For the purpose of helping others. For the purpose of helping others recover. I hope that there are people that are looking at another way towards achieving their recovery. I hope that they find this and realize that AA and NA may not be for them. It may be for them. I'm not here to say that it's not. They may be looking for another way. They may need to hear that, and they don't have to go on my path, but they may need to be reminded that you need to know why you're on this planet. You need to know why you wake up every day. You need to know who you are other than a person to go just get a job, and you need to know who you are beyond just another person that rents something that you'll never own. Just going back into the rat trap is not necessarily going to bring someone recovery. Why are you really using? Is going back to the workforce what you need to do right away as you're recovering from your addiction? I wasn't at all involved in the off the grid stuff at that time. However, the Vipassana meditation was kind of done not at an off grid location, but at a rural location. So, spiritual development and trips into nature, trips outside the city, those seeds were already planted. The off the grid stuff came later. In hindsight, I can tell you, it would be very therapeutic for a lot of these people to go through their recovery in a rural environment, and then to do some day trips and go into the city, maybe do an AA meeting if that's on your agenda, and then go back out and do some personal healing. You're not powerlessness. You're not powerless. This powerlessness mojo is not good energy. Going out in nature to me is reclaiming that power that I have within. My divine masculine power, my divine feminine, my divine power. All of which is Alex Hansery, past, present, and future. Alex Hansery, the deity. Not worshiping myself, but knowing that I am only a fraction right now of what I actually am. Drugs and things like that and abuse suppress people from what they actually are. And they could be subliminally affected to believe that they have to make themselves dumb and maybe talk like a little Barbie girl. Or be like, hey man, what's up? Take another fucking hit of this. And I'm not attacking marijuana users, but abusers, people that are self-destructive are using those things to numb themselves without any restraint. And there are consequences for that. Even if the consequence isn't necessarily going to jail and the substance harming you in a direct, overt physical way, your physical health, your emotional and your spiritual health may be suffering from the numbing. And again, the numbing from what? The suppression of who and what you are. It is aligning with that path and walking that path and facing social persecution that someone can actually heal. It was actually 2006 that I megaphoned for the first time about 9/11, thousands of people standing there watching the World Cup. At that moment in time, on that day, the 4th of July, as I yelled, the 4th of July. You can find it on YouTube, Alex Hansery Megaphones, Portland. I was unleashing my spirit. People may not have liked what I had to say. People, women, others. For those years that I was expressing myself, they saw my lion roar. There's a picture of me megaphoning the Oregonian. Something came out of me. It was like, no more lies. No more lies. It was like an ancient Indian chant. And there were so many of us saying that. And there I was with a megaphone and many people with 9/11 truth signs. 9/11 truth now. Stop covering up the lies about 9/11. We were outside the Oregonian. Oregonian photographer comes out, snaps my picture. Boom. I joked about this from day one. It was an epic picture with my finger pointing, just whoosh, it was like mighty wings behind me. It was like I could have imagined like a better picture that captured the spirit that I was expressing inside at that moment. That was not a staged picture. I was randomly screaming and pointing in all different directions, but in particular, and pointing through the doors at the Oregonian, owned by Hearst Publications, the USA Today of Oregon, the mainstream newspaper of Oregon. No more lies. No more lies. In that moment in time, we were in charge. And I don't mean in a tyrannical way. We represented the truth. We were unstoppable. And those In the Fed marches and those other 9/11 truth marches that we did around Portland, the streets were alive with spirit during those years, with positive spirit that was pushing through the darkness, that was more powerful than the darkness. The good was stronger than the darkness. I was there. I felt it. I remember when people said, Alex, that show, I've seen you on TV. You're talking about transhumanism. You're talking about these topics that I've never heard about. I don't necessarily agree with everything that you're saying, but I defend your right to say it. Good job going out there. Holy hell. How do you deal with that? How do you do it? And I'm telling you, folks, I got to wrap things up here. Society shifted. Society did shift. I saw it. There was a period in time where it was not a big deal for Alex Ansary to be Alex Ansary and on Access TV, but also to be working at a bar, the bar section of Ruth Chris Steakhouse as a busser. It was tough on me. It was tough on my ego. There's literally some days where I went from megaphoning, sweating in the street, to changing my clothes downstairs, same area that was part of the Shanghai tunnels, feeling that slave energy, but not knowing that that was actually one of the Shanghai tunnels. And then trying to represent this freedom consciousness and energy and talking to people in my city and the awkwardness of working with coworkers that saw me for who I was, yet were seeing me as their busser and treating me like their busser. And in some cases, not really being treated with respect. And how that hurt. And how it hurt to be thrown away. When the, after predicting that the economy, like many people in the alternative media, was going to take a dive, people tell me, Alex, man, you were right. I don't want to hear any more of your predictions. Some people are acting like you're a little scared, like, whoa, dude, you totally fucking said some shit was going to go down. And here we are. Well, what did that do to business for a short period of time? But only in a short period of time, because the rich got richer and Ruth Chris Steakhouse just expanded. There you go. Just light your fucking Cuban cigar with a fucking $100 bill, but that aside. Business took a dive 2008, 2009. There were a lot less companies throwing big lavish parties. A lot of restructuring going on. So they cut their dead weight. And I was a part of their dead weight. So after 2009, there were a couple years of me, again, dating people that I never had the time to date when I was at Ruth Chris Steakhouse. And living in different roommate situations, but ultimately feeling that it was time for me to really start exiting that type of a lifestyle of working around downtown, of being around downtown, being around that same drug area. In the last few years of working around Ruth Chris Steakhouse, I would walk to work and walk across that Burnside Bridge, where many a men and many a women not only have shot up, but have straight up killed themselves and have jumped head first or feet first into the Willamette River. Again, same polluted river full of human fecal matter where the ships sailed on, carrying the drunk, dead, kidnapped, shanghaied sailors that found their way to Old Portland. So it's been a journey. 2011, 2012, going to Texas, finding Costilla County, going back to Portland. 2014, starting my TV show Up. And even though I was never homeless while being a junkie, now I'm clean and sober, little pot here and there, but clean and sober, on the straight and narrow, got all this years of social media, and I'm coming back to a city where I have nowhere to live and no one to put me up because of the vast amount of homelessness. As where a stereotype, well, why are you homeless? Or why would you come back here and be homeless? And the association with mentally ill, the mentally ill population, the mental illness, homelessness connection, with many people not knowing that mental illness can come from being homeless too long, that those men literally are talking to themselves for a reason. Actually, couple, where would you like to start? Do you want to go back and talk more about the old town? Those spirits screaming for another drink. Oh, it's not by accident. Portland's #1 in sex trafficking. Oh, it's not by accident. Portland has a history of kidnapping also. It's not by accident they have more AA meetings and strip clubs per capita than any other cities. It's not by accident Portland has more bookstores, because there's also people thinking really hard about things. And so it was in Portland that I almost faced my death. It was in Portland that I actually had my birth, physically, as a baby in 1980. And it was in Portland that I learned everything I needed to learn about the New World Order and the New World Order's influence over society. And it was in Portland where I learned about the necessity to get off the grid. The not so wonderful things about living in a big city with lots of drugs, gangs, and gender warfare on a fault line, and in the same route where if we were ever invaded by China and Russia, Portland would be ground zero as a transport hub a transport hub. One of the topics on my show, reoccurring in my discussions about World War III and a potential occupation of this country that I feel I can feel in spirit, others have seen in dreams, prophetic dreams. And knowing that it's a city currently with all of these sexual deviant things going on, child sex trafficking, and its past, I have a very strong concern that it will be ground zero for exporting American females through the port of Portland, which now has a very small fraction of work activity, import-export activity. Some major companies have left the port of Portland. It is a ghost town, and when you see major companies, major porting companies that are like responsible for a very large portion or percentage of the activity, when you see that type of stuff leaving, that is not a good sign. I will remind you of what happened to South Central Los Angeles before the Bloods and Crips, before the Watts riots. They lost their jobs, their factory jobs, the auto jobs, and all these jobs that came after World War II vanished, and they were left with nothing. They were left with nothing. And the Watts riots were not too far away, followed by the Civil Rights Movement, where they assassinated their political leaders. And then you had the CIA funding the Crips and the Bloods with drugs, guns, and other things. So it is in Portland that I've learned about a lot of these things that set me on this path, where I came out of the womb, where I faced my death, and you can even say challenged death, with a sense of arrogance, only to find myself humbled and rescued by the universe, protected from evil, and allowed, during all these years, people assuming that the government was going to come after me and kill me, and well, you got to be working for the government if you're allowed to be on Access TV, to actually experience that freedom, and to know that this is really about how society treats its own, not the government. The government left me alone. This whole experience that I learned from Portland was how society, real people, despite what they say about themselves and what they say are their values, how society will treat those that speak the truth. Now I'm in a state of recovery, not from addiction. I am in a state of recovery from society's impact. Society, sociology, civilization's environmental impact on my psyche and sense of self-value and sense of possibility. I have been living the off-grid lifestyle as of the last year to retrieve all aspects of my soul that have been taken from me. I am looking at my YouTube channel in a whole different light. I came across a very beautiful woman that has a channel. She made a comment on one of my videos. I was looking at some videos regarding ways to stay motivated about your YouTube channel and bring in new viewers, etc., etc. Some of you may have watched some of them, helpful videos on marketing your content to new viewers. And I saw her video and went, wow, I'm going to have to check out her content. Next morning, being this morning, there's a comment from her appreciating my honesty. It may not be a super marketable video. The video may only have 300 views, but this woman with 100,000 subscribers that survived poverty, that survived a single parent household, that has this very rare, like gorgeous outward shell, outward appearance, and yet this also inner discipline to build a YouTube channel, to, you know, have something other than it being about makeup or twerking or, you know, whatever, and to basically know how to tap into that zeitgeist and use that intuition and, you know, direct the positive energy and believe that you can, without being a cheesy new ager, but knowing that you can do it. Knowing that you can do it. So Access TV was a technological bridge that followed my addiction. It filled a void. I stepped into shoes very quickly before even knowing how to speak. Some of my earlier episodes are embarrassing, but I knew what needed to be said, regardless of how I said it, how loud I sounded, how much I may have sounded like Alex Jones, talking about defeating the police state control grid, the dynamic human spirit that refuses to submit, inner bullhorn. It was the process of doing it anyways. And now I'm on the cusp of a whole new cycle as we are 12 years later after my clean date. And I am 11 years after the start of Outside the Box TV. Now, after a couple of years of rest, I'm planning my own video on demand channel. And I'm planning a weekly video Outside the Box TV mobile edition from the road. I'm looking for volunteers to help me share the content. I'm looking for people to receive a DVD or my content in major American cities with a connection with Access TV. Because I believe still in the magic of Access TV, even though we're in the digital internet age. A lot of these Access TV centers, Portland's obviously done better than most, but they're now going digital. They can receive digital files. Portland can air my stuff. I can send them a video. My friend that works there can download my link from YouTube HD and air it with people that don't have internet access, the older generation that are still looking for answers. And just like there's a synchronicity between me and her, and me looking at her image and her video, and then a message from her and going, wow, I feel like the universe just showed me a sign. I've also been in a situation where I was in Portland. Oh, wow, I'm really glad this came to me. Like, this literally came to me now, this memory. And see, and these are the reasons why I associate what I'm doing more with the spiritual path and not this war, this revolution. And why I feel I'm not alone in this. So I'm in Sandy, Oregon. I am parked alongside the river. And I'm looking for a place to stick my feet in there. It's like July. And I think I drove from Portland the same day just to get out there. And there's a couple guys that are out there. And the guy said, hey, it's you. And the guy was like, I was asleep last night and the TV was on. And there was a guy yelling, wake up! You know, and he's going off about these issues. And it was you, man. You were on Access TV and you told me to wake up, and I did. Now, we never went on to become great friends or anything or connect on Facebook. We went for a few beers, but I had to get back to town. So we weren't meant to become like best friends. Maybe that was something for him. Something happened there. I'm yelling, wake up! This dude wakes up literally, and we're at the same place at the same time at the same river the next day. I can go on and on. What I didn't talk about was the divine interventions that took place when I was using, where I could have lost my life in a car, but the continuation of the divine intervention years later, where I could have lost my life in New Mexico going down a hill, and a similar type of divine intervention took place that stopped my car that was going down the hill without brakes, to have someone driving up the road. I kid you not, 30 seconds later, I'm in the middle of nowhere. I'm not in Albuquerque. I'm in the middle of nowhere, just outside of Cuesta. And this Hispanic man that stopped, he got me a tow. He was driving a tow truck. Took me to his place a mile away, where he had a tire repair setup all the way. So yeah, I will continue this story later on. Plan to write a book at some point, because what I'm witnessing in retrospect is an unusual lifetime with a whole lot of backing from the universe. And I could see myself at a really young age dancing with the dark side in order to understand it more. That includes the taking of LSD that preceded the heroin addiction, actually, in 1999, and how I feel like I was able to see the dark grid for the first time. And it was disturbing. And there was a spiritual awakening then that you don't want to walk in the footsteps of this teacher, this person that you think is mentoring you, this person that you're looking up to. Speaking of the old friend of the family. So as I shift gears and bring this to a close, I've now shared more than ever about that period of my life of addiction and recovery. Skipping all the, really detailed bloody stories of stabbing myself with a needle and missing. Sparing the stories of having to get out of certain places when it was exposed that I was an addict, like having to move out real quick. Jumping over all the emotional trauma and focusing on what it was that caused that addiction and that intuitive feeling something was wrong in the Middle East, and I was feeling it in my blood. It was like something was going on. Other people can have this experience too, where you're from. You could be feeling stuff in your own area and not realize that you're responding to it in an unhealthy manner. And the experience of my life going to the treatment centers and realizing I had to recover on my own and be my own mentor, counselor. Starting my own TV show while humbling myself and bussing tables at the age of 25 and doing that 24 to 29 for 5 years straight. And that is very humbling as a shorter than average male in today's society to play that role in the world of the tall waiters while actually being who I really am outside the matrix on Access TV. That was a very balancing yin yang, maybe masculine feminine. Wow. I'm coming up with shit I've never wow. Writing brings out the creative side. So do some of these podcasts. I think this is going to have to be a regular thing. You're going to see me pumping out a lot of news because we need to bring more audience members to this channel. But I think that some of these podcasts need to continue because I believe it's doing some helping and I believe it's doing some healing. Not only for myself, but for some of you. With that, I'm going to wrap this up. It is a beautiful day here, 12 years afterwards. Sitting under the sun, it is June 5th, 2016. From the forest, somewhere out there in southwest Colorado. Subscribe if you're a new listener. And we'll keep the Life Story podcasts and the Stories from the Road podcasts and so much more coming your way. My email is alex_answery. If you want to provide me with some feedback on this podcast without it being so public on the YouTube comment section, I also I cordially invite you to join my own forum. I'd like to see some of the more thought out responses to some of my commentary and what I share with you to go, instead of YouTube, to go to alexanswery.tv/forums. And we'll talk to you next time.